We reconvene for Liberty Conspiracy Live here on Rokfin, on Rumble, on YouTube, and on X/Twitter. Good to have you along for the ride, fellow conspirators, because freedom is out of fashion nowadays. Welcome to the good ship Liberty. Good to have you here every Monday through Friday. We reconvene and gather at 6 p.m. Eastern U.S. time to hang out, break apart the news stories, suck that libertarian marrow out of it, and give ourselves sustenance and pass along, hopefully, some long-standing lessons from the breaking news that can be applied to future situations, some history, some learning, some ethics, and economics. And it's a two-way street in this classroom, so thanks for being part of it, whether you're a student or a teacher throughout each program. I've got a number of things set up as if I were back in my lecture hall talking to the students, but I want to allow you to make sure that you know you can provide information to me because it is a two-way street. You can also check out my Substack. It's the Gardner Goldsmith Substack, and every Sunday, the Sunday News Assembly is presented there. That's 20 stories pertaining to liberty, plus contextual information to help derive intellectual ammunition, those long-standing lessons for liberty that can be applied to future instances such as the ones we're seeing today, and look back at other instances that could have been similar in history or philosophy. So I hope it is a good presentation every Sunday. I hope you'll sign up. Most everything I put out there is free, and I hope you'll spread the word. I'm LG Grande, Buenos, whatever time zone you call home. LG Grande stands for the big G in Espanol. The G comes before the Grande because they always put their qualifiers after their nouns. So I am the G big in Espanol, Gardner Goldsmith, and thanks for hanging out. If you're finding us here at the Conspiracy because you found us at X and you found my MRC TV work. And big good vibes going out to Eric Shiner and the team. Had a great conversation with Eric earlier today for about a half hour. And we were talking about the stuff going on with the Palestinians, the Israelis, the college protests and things like that, and all the various opinions that everybody seems to have in various offices, people he's met down around Washington, D.C. So that was really interesting. And we went back into some of the history and the displacement of the people there back in 1947 and even earlier, the plans for the setup of that state. So a lot of interesting conversation. Hope to share some of those facets with you. And if you've got info, again, drop it into the comments inside X. I can see those inside Rumble and our original home, Rokfin. And, of course, over at YouTube, I can see what's happening at YouTube as well. So thanks for hanging out, everybody. And please remember that it's going to be a beautiful night. We're going to cover a lot of crazy stuff from the politicians, and hopefully we're going to turn their political frowns upside down in front of the electric fire and derive some long-standing lessons tonight. So I am really, really looking forward to hanging out with you on this, the 1st of May, 2024. Liberty Conspiracy Live for 2024 is looking pretty cool. Let's find out what's on tap tonight, everybody, and see what we can see. See what's happening, as the funksters used to say in the 70s, man. See what's happening. What's on tap tonight for Liberty Conspiracy Live? Well, tonight, you are not a number. We'll be looking at the big story, and the big story is about subsidized neighbors. Subsidized neighbors? Wow, that could apply to all sorts of things, right? Well, indeed it could. And let me make this a little smaller for you. I mean, the staff. Hey, staff, can you make this a little smaller for the audience? Thank you very much. Then we'll be looking at MTG. That's right. MTG is going to push for removal of the speaker. She is not letting up. We'll tell you about that. That'll be our first big chunk of a story, and it is quite interesting. There's some little facets to this that I think are pretty good, and I've got some video to show you from a guy whose journalism I respect greatly. Then we're going to be talking about the protests, the feds, the money ties from feds to universities as threats to stop speech, and the Alabama song. What is that? Oh, show me the way to the next whiskey bar? Well, maybe not quite. We'll talk about the Alabama song tied into these public places, so-called, where tax money is spent on the universities and how all the strings connect, even internationally, to Egypt. Got another video clip that I've recorded for you, a big video chunk that I think will help tie some of these lessons together in the classroom tonight. Then we're going to be talking about our third big story, the new port in Gaza. Boots on the ground, and I'm not talking about Bootsy Collins. Boots on the ground. Well, you probably have seen this one. I thought I was the only one who found it. And then I found all these other people that I respect so much. They're covering it too. I'm like, oh, man. But in a way, it was, obviously it's great because a lot of good people are getting the information out there. But I thought I had the scoop on them. Not a chance. So we'll be talking about the boots on the ground, Bootsy Collins playing at the Port of Gaza. Get your tickets now. They're only $320 million each. And yes, the Orwellian Secretary of Defense. That's the one that ties in that everybody's been covering. And then we're going to talk about the tariff issue because I want to show you the big presentation on tariffs and some of the interesting responses that I got from viewers at MRC TV. After I laid it all out for them, they still were just not jumping at what I was feeding. They weren't up for that dinner. So we'll talk about that. And I want to welcome everybody to the viewership at X. And please spread the word, give it the thumbs up and all that stuff. Thank you very much. And also, I say that as if I'm over here. Thank you very much. Jason Barker is in the house. The man. He is the man. He's coming out of the foxhole for a little while, and he's hanging out doing good stuff. Jason, again, and I got your text, Jason. I wasn't able to respond to it yet, but thank you so much. If you got to see last night's show, I was mentioning our conversation, how great, how much I appreciated it. Anarchy Andrew is there, my neighbor to the west northwest, just within the state of New Hampshire, and I'm really glad that those guys are there, starting things off at Rokfin. If you want to join them and lay down some chats, meet some cool people, they are terrific. Over at Rumble, the dancing banana Freegan is dancing. Even though he said he's not that into hockey last night, I know he's probably dancing because the Toronto team of hockey scored, a couple of 3-point shots and sent one of the balls over the wall, and they beat the Bruins. So good stuff there. And I guess it's tied up 8,000 to 8,000 now in the NHL FBA playoffs. So it's going to be cool. Get your FanDuel on and do all that stuff. And I know Freegan's like, I don't do all that stuff. I know, Freegan. Thanks for being there, man. Birdhouse Blues second in line with the musical notes and the bird and the house. Yeah. Hey, do you have a permit for that house? That little house, I don't know. And that, talking about little house, did the Ingalls family even have a permit to build that little house? How could they have built a little house if they didn't get permission from the government? Huh? I mean, what's up with that? What up with that? Right? Come on. Lieutenant Oracle of Truth, we're going to ask you sometime. We're going to go to the Truth Army. It's like the Kiss Army. You have to wear makeup and stuff to be in the Truth Army. I like that. And also, everybody else who's watching after the fact, I did want to bring this up. I knew there was something on my mind. You might have seen it at the back of my mind in my bald pate. If you're watching after the fact, please, is it a pate if it's bald? I don't know. It's not a pelt, but yes, it is a pate. If you're watching after the fact and you see any of these stories that appeal to you as valuable, important, anything like that, where, it's breaking news and you want to get it out there to people, maybe I almost had a scoop, but I didn't quite have a scoop, or whatever it is, if it's something that you think people can derive those long-standing lessons, then in Rokfin, in Rumble and in YouTube, just pause it and then send it out, and you'll see the little window that you can click, and you can send it out at that time code right there. And again, all the stories that we discuss, at least 99% of them, 99, like at Maxwell Smart, are in my X feed for that day. So if you're watching later on and you're not watching live, just if it's that day, just go into my Twitter X feed. You'll find the stories and you can link yourself over to those. And you can tell the NewsGuard people to stop messing with us at MRC TV because we always hyperlink. Yes, indeed, NewsGuard. I do it for you guys, but I do it for myself too. I want to get the information out. I do it out for principles, but man, NewsGuard's such a hassle. Yeah, I probably mention them like once a show or once every couple shows or whatever. Because it is weird to think that you're just a dude working with some of your friends putting stories out, and you literally have the national government breathing down your back, trying to pull you down like a wolf in the woods. That's weird. That's a really strange thing. I never would have imagined it, And you got that big old government coming down your back, whether it's through NewsGuard or the Virality Project or Google. and their subsidies from the federal government, putting MRC TV on the blacklist. The big guys coming after us. Got to get away from them. So, talking about big, guess what it's time for, one and all? It's time for us to begin the big story.
The big story. The big story. The big story. The big story.
Yes, the big story. And what is the big story gonna be? Well, my friends, we need a theme for the big story. And it's coming from some folks who, if they were trying to fly, they would probably crash because their Zeppelin was lead. Oh, man. They're insane. They're insane. That's all there is to it. They're insane in the brain, insane in the membrane. Look at that. So it's about immigrants, my friend. It's about immigrants. Now, you know me, I'm a voluntarist. And so we're going to take the constitutional side of this first, and then we'll expand it and get some voluntarist lessons out of this story. What's the first story, my friends? Well, the first story comes to us via the good folks at antiwar.com, but you probably have seen this all over the place. In fact, I've got a video segment to show you in just a little bit about some of this. White House considers taking in Palestinian refugees from Gaza. Again, don't forget, Antiwar is doing their fundraiser. So if you get the opportunity, check it out. Try to get them some money. That would be awesome. White House considers taking in Palestinian refugees from Gaza. Okay, so evidently it's just the White House. Now, even though you're paying taxes for the White House, evidently it's just going to be on the lawn. It's only, oh, no, I forgot. They're going to be subsidizing the moves. Think about how wise this might be, okay? So the United States government is subsidizing Israel to blow people apart in Gaza. The United States government also helped prop up the leadership of Hamas, as did the Israeli government. And we know that Benjamin Netanyahu literally has been cited as a documented supporter of having Hamas in charge because he knew they would be oppositional and they would negotiate, so that then Israel could use that as a pretext to say, we've got to take these guys out, they're violent, even as the Israeli government constantly, every year, hundreds of people a year, would kidnap people from Gaza, bring them in, and hold them without trial. Also withheld water from them, put them in a corral, and continued to expand into that region from 1947 onwards. But, you know, I know it's really difficult to figure out who might be the occupying force. Well, working with the occupying force and giving them the weapons, most of them that they're using to kill people in the occupied area, the United States government now wants to take some of the people, or all of the people, or a large portion of the people that are remaining who, you know, might not feel too good about the United States government blasting apart their mothers and fathers and kids and businesses and homes and stuff like that, and supporting the regime that has starved them and reduced their ability to make any money and not allowed them to leave. They might not appreciate, coming over here. They want to take the people who remain, the remainder that have not been blown to pieces, and bring some of them to the United States on your dime after they already used your dime to decimate that population. I don't know about you, but for some reason that doesn't sound like a good idea to me. I don't know. It sort of sounds like maybe you're creating an enemy block to bring into the United States because those poor people will resent the United States. Kind of like what the Times Square bomber said when they apprehended him a number of years ago. And he associated the civilians of the United States with the corrupt government of the United States that had been meddling in the Middle East for decades. And of course, they said, how do you plead? And he said, guilty, 100 times guilty. And if the United States government continues to do what it is doing in the Middle East, more American civilians will die. So now Biden's got the genius idea, as Dave DeCamp writes. The Biden administration is considering taking in certain Palestinian refugees and giving them a permanent safe haven in the U.S., CBS News reported on Tuesday. The report said that officials across several government agencies are examining options to resettle Palestinians who have immediate family members who are American citizens or permanent residents. They are also considering making the option available for Palestinians with any relatives who are Americans. Okay, so now again, we go back to the conservative argument that the United States has got to handle immigration. Because without that incorrect precept, this wouldn't be happening. It's the 1875 Chilung v. Freeman decision that brought about the centralization, the command and control idea that the government should handle immigration, which includes refugee status to bring people in. The Constitution itself only cites naturalization, how you become a citizen, not whether foreigners can come here. The idea that the U.S. government not only can allow people to come in or not come in, that is not only unconstitutional, it's immoral. That's where we get to the voluntary side of it. But on the constitutional side of it, they're accelerating the problem by now saying we're going to spend federal money on bringing these people in. They don't have any so-called authority, even in the document that illegitimately they claim has authority over me. I never signed the Constitution. That's just a prima facie fact. It has no authority over me or you if you weren't in the military or the government. It doesn't. So they assume, they make that assumption, they adopt that conceit, and then once they adopt the conceit, they break the rules anyway. They don't even care. Whatever facilitates whatever their daily needs are, right? So now they want to bring these people in. A leaked Israeli intelligence ministry document from October said that the expulsion of all 2.3 million Palestinians living in Gaza into Egypt would be the best case scenario for Israel. The Israeli ministers and Knesset members have not been shy about their desire to reestablish Jewish settlements in the Strip. And that's been a long-term plan. Over and over again, they have taken more and more land. Now, I'm going to show you Senator Kennedy, not Teddy, the other Kennedy with the Southern accent, as he also engages in this incredibly hubristic, conceited arrogance, telling Egypt, you got to take these people. So you've got the arrogance of, we're going to displace these people by sending U.S. weapons over there. We're going to say that if you criticize it, you're somehow a racist, Jew-hating scumbag, when all you're doing is saying, you got this Constitution at the most minor level, then you can get into the immorality of it, which is even deeper, right? So they accuse you of being anti-Semitic, and then they have the gall to assume for the government of Egypt that they've got to take in X number of displaced, still living people, right? Now, what's interesting about that is there's another facet of this, which actually ties into the university protests. And we're going to get to that when we hear Senator Kennedy. There are a number of lessons that I want to present to you here that can be derived from a clip that I've got of Senator Kennedy on Fox News. But before we go to that, what I'd like to do is remind you of news from yesterday, because a lot of times I don't want to have news just pass through the news cycle or under the bridge of the news observing. So the river of news continues. I want to remind you of this story from yesterday from this reporter from Fox News, Bill Melugin, who wrote, exclusive, internal DHS data reveals the 45 plus cities that hundreds of thousands of migrants have flown into via the Biden administration's controversial CHNV mass parole program. Now, remember, I've written about this for MRC TV. What they do is it's technically illegal for these people to come into the country, but they give them these paroles that can last 8 months, and then they just recycle the paroles so they can be there indefinitely. And then they lose track of them, right? Like, what was it? 150,000 kids? They can't even keep track of them. And that was months ago. That was almost a year ago. They don't know. Oh, we put them with some families. We don't know where they are. Oh, okay. Should put them with the Manson family, for God's sake. How about the Corleone family? We'll play Family Feud. Got the Corleones against the Mansons. Number one answer, corrupt federal government. You get to play. Ridiculous. So the DHS data, as Bill Malugin writes, shows that during an 8-month stretch from January through August 2023, roughly 200,000 migrants flew into the U.S. via the program, with 80% of them, 161,000, arriving in the state of Florida in 4 cities: Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Orlando, and Tampa. And then he has the top cities. Miami got nearly 100,000 people. Fort Lauderdale, 60,500. New York City, almost 15,000. Houston, Texas, almost 8,000. And on down the list, down to Austin, number 15 with 171. Now, I wanted to bring that up to you, not because I am opposed to immigration, but because I'm in favor of freedom. And I don't support picking my neighbor's pocket to either subsidize somebody's move or put a block up against freedom of association, because the picking of the pocket is the major problem. And from there, all else stems. It just depends who has the power, conservatives, and you're seeing it now. You're not going to get the answers you want all the time. This is the unraveling that your very philosophy of collectivist immigration control has wrought. You aren't in charge of the wizard's machine. And you're not going to be perhaps next election either. Who knows? And it's amazing that some people still think that Donald Trump didn't do the job. He promised he was going to put up a wall. What if you're a supposed constitutionalist? Just read the document, for goodness sake, and stop being I won't say hypocritical, but hit or miss on it. Be consistent. Stop being inconsistent on it. Because, again, practically, you're not going to get where you want to get. It's not going to hold, and you're going to keep fighting over it. This is why everybody's always arguing about immigration. Why? I don't understand why a guy in New Hampshire should have a say over what's going on in Arizona. It just doesn't make any sense. It's totally stupid. It's unworkable in the first place. How are you going to manage the money in some moral way, right? This amount of money, it's like the Dennis Moore skit. You just put, instead of Dennis Moore, you put an ICE agent in place of Dennis Moore from Monty Python. So he's a highwayman still, but the reason he's there is not to give money, so-called, to the poor. He's calling everybody out of the carriage and telling them that, all right, turn out your pockets. And then he's looking at it. Well, you've got 10p, you got 10 pounds, 20p, you've got 5 pounds, 6p, you've got 40 pounds, 10p. So you give, and he looks at the camera, he goes, well, this redistribution of wealth thing is tougher than I thought. Now, if you look at it as who's going to be satisfied, how are you going to make it all equal? The very act of taxation is immoral, but it's so unworkable. How are you going to get everybody's interest playing into how that wall is going to be built, or where it's going to be built, or how it's going to be policed? None of it is moral. None of it is workable. It's an absolute clown show. It's a farce. And people continue to fall back on, well, yeah, I know, but we have to manage it. We've got to get control. No, it's not constitutional if you call yourself that. And I'm an anarchist, just here to remind people of that. Okay? I'm in favor of freedom of association, but I'm also in favor of not seeing the federal government pick my neighbor's pocket to pay for Palestinian refugees that they made refugees to then move to the United States. I mean, how perverse is that? That's like taking the daughter of 2 people you killed and giving her a place to stay on your estate or something like that. It's just crazy, absolutely insane, totally nuts. Now, I want to show you a little something. We're going to get to the Fox News segment in a little bit, but before we do that, I want to show one of the people on whom many of the conservatives thought they could count for this command and control immigration system, Speaker Johnson. As we noted in our billboard for the show's schedule tonight, we're going to talk about MTG. And in order to talk about MTG, we have a theme. This one is coming from Gary Newman. No, it's not Cars. It's another one of his great hits, Me, I Disconnect From You, which is what MTG would like to do with Speaker Johnson.
Me, I disconnect from you. moved in silence. Oh, I can feel his mind decaying. Honey inches away from me, and I disconnect from you.
Yeah, I love that. The way they do all the spacey stuff there, it's just awesome. So cool. I love it. I love it. All right, good stuff. Bring it down. Okay, got to get rid of that thing. I don't even know what that's for. Okay, so we're going to talk about MTG trying to disconnect. Wouldn't it be nice if we could disconnect? Here is Marjorie Taylor Greene saying that she is going to proceed with the effort to oust Speaker Johnson. And we've got a little audio and video here for you from ABC News, but at least it's just a source. So they've got it here. They probably edited it for some reason or whatever, but we'll hear what she has to say.
Turn out and vote in no thing I know. There's one thing I know. If we get President Trump back in the White House in January of 2025, and we are lucky enough to earn the trust again from voters in America to have a Republican majority in this House of Representatives, that we have a job to do. We cannot let people down again. We cannot fail President Trump. And this cannot happen. The MAGA agenda that I believe in, the Make America.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, they're going to their commercial, so I'll just go over here. Yep, that's right, everybody. So they selected a video of her praising Donald Trump. Donald Trump, who did not give people what they wanted on the immigration thing. Donald Trump, who laid down the CARES Act with $2 trillion of wasteful spending and laid the stage with his March 13th, 2020 so-called emergency executive order that the states and other facets of government could then institute lockdowns on people. She thinks Donald Trump, whom, yes, by the way, she likened to Jesus when Jesus was, of course, pitted against Pontius Pilate. Somehow Donald Trump's court problems are like that. Well, let's go back to MTG.
Great Again agenda that I support and Americans support. And the whole reason why Republicans are going to turn out and vote in November because they support President Trump. We need leaders in the House of Representatives that are going to get this done. Not working for Hakeem Jeffries, not working for Joe Biden, and not going to be twisted and lulled into keep continuing the disgusting practices of Washington, D.C. Mike Johnson is not capable of that job. He has proven it over and over again. And so next week, I am going to be calling this motion to vacate. Absolutely calling it. I can't wait to see Democrats go out and support a Republican speaker and have to go home to their primaries and have to run for Congress again, having supported a Republican speaker, a Christian conservative. I think that'll play well. I'm excited about it. And I also can't wait to see my Republican conference show their cards and show who we are, because voters deserve it. Is the Republican Party, have they finally learned their lesson? Have they finally heard the message from voters back at home? Are they willing to actually fight, or are they going to just keep going along to get along? Because it's really easy to do that in Washington, D.C.
Awesome. Now you can see next to her is Thomas Massey. He must have gotten up and spoke. And I couldn't find the video from that, but I noticed it was Thomas Massey a little bit earlier. So obviously, her words are her words. She opted to talk about Donald Trump at that press availability outside the east steps of the Capitol building. I lived just diagonal to that, like 1 block away for the summer of 1989. It was great. But great bookstore, by the way. The Trover Bookshop right around the corner was right next to where the original Cato Institute was. And there was a Roy Rogers chicken place there. Oh, man. And that's actually where the Hawk and Dove bar was, where Ted Kennedy and Chris, what was the guy? He was a senator from Connecticut. He ended up becoming head of like the Motion Pictures Association for the ratings group or whatever. They supposedly made a sandwich of a like waitress there. It was just, ridiculous, unscrupulous, terrible stuff. But she put the words in there about the MAGA train and all that stuff. But her points, I think, are probably very, very resonant with a lot of people when she talks about the speaker. So now I want to present to you some information. And again, we're curving away a little bit from the Gaza repopulation, moving people away, the port stuff. We're going to get to that as well with the boots on the ground stuff there. So there's all that looming United States funding of warfare stuff there. But it does tie in because people were so frustrated about the backtracking, the flipping of the Speaker of the House, who originally said, no to Ukraine, right? Bad stuff, bad, no funding for Ukraine. Can't do that. He didn't cite the Constitution and say, we don't have the power to do that under their Constitution. He just said, no, it's a bad idea. So evidently, if he thought it was a good idea, it would be fine, which he did later on, $61 billion worth. And of course, he said no funding for Ukraine unless we get something for the border, which MTG and many of the other conservatives who do think that it's the central government's prerogative to control the borders of all the states, even though it's not in the Constitution that they swear to uphold. I understand they're operating under that misapprehension. So they think we've got to do something about this. We have to control this machine. And Speaker Johnson originally said he was going to tie the funding to it, and then he's backstabbed us, right? Okay, so she's upset. She's upset about the way he did it. He ended up having to be a tiebreaker vote, which also shows just how corrupt he is. And he completely flipped over his original stance on Ukraine, Israel money, and on the border. So I think she makes some valid points for people to remember, and conservatives will remember that when they go to the polls, as long as, the polls aren't manipulated. So with that stated, however, I want to remember some of these things about Speaker Johnson with greater clarity. And I think nobody has done a better job on that than showing him in his own words. And that person is Glenn Greenwald. If you watched his system update number 263, about 15 minutes in, he goes into this beautifully. And he's got personal experience from this. Watch this. This is very, very good journalism.
And to do so, he just completely reversed, abandoned so many of the positions he claimed to passionately believe in as a core value. As a result, there is now an effort underway by some of the more anti-war and populist members of the House Republican caucus to use their very slim majority that the Republicans have and withhold their votes in favor of Mike Johnson, which would deny him a majority of the House if you just had 3 or 4 Republican defections. That's how they ended up deposing Kevin McCarthy. And there's only one way, if that happens, for Mike Johnson to save his job. And that would be to convince Democrats to vote for Mike Johnson as Speaker of the House, to ensure that his speakership is protected from the dissatisfied members in his own caucus. That the Democrats would vote for Speaker or would engage in procedural votes designed to ensure that Mike Johnson, who they were calling a fascist and a racist and a white supremacist and a religious fanatic and a pro-Russia asset up until about 2 months ago, to ensure that that same person remains as House Speaker. And the most striking part about this is it's not hard at all to understand why Democrats are doing that. If I were a House Democrat, I would also do everything possible to try and keep Mike Johnson in that position and to save his speakership, because there's nothing more valuable to my agenda than Mike Johnson as Speaker. Here is the leader of the House Democrats, the Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, in a press release today. He's a congressman from New York who would become House Speaker if the Democrats take over the majority in 2024. And he issues this statement on behalf of the joint Democratic leadership on the motion to vacate, meaning the motion by Congresswoman Green and Congressman Massey to remove and vacate Mike Johnson's speakership. He says, quote, "For months, House Republicans irresponsibly delayed critical security assistance to our Democratic allies in Ukraine, Israel, and the Indo-Pacific, while simultaneously blocking humanitarian assistance to civilians in harm's way in places like Gaza, Haiti, and the Sudan. Thanks to a bipartisan coalition of Democrats and Republicans led by President Biden, we were finally able to meet the national security needs of the American people. Apparently, the national security needs of the American people depend on sending another $60 billion to Ukraine to fight Russia, sending $26 billion to Israel on top of the billions we send to them every year to destroy Gaza, and then spending another multi-billion-dollar package to strengthen the military of Taiwan in case they end up having a conflict with China. The Democratic statement goes on, quote, "From the very beginning of this Congress, House Democrats have put people over politics and found bipartisan common ground with traditional Republicans in order to deliver real results. At the same time, House Democrats have aggressively pushed back against MAGA extremism. We will continue to do just that. At this moment, upon completion of our national security work, the time has come to turn the page on this chapter of pro-Putin Republican obstruction. We will vote to table Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene's motion to vacate the chair. If she invokes this motion, it will not succeed," which is another way of saying that Mike Johnson is one of the good Republicans, even though they were calling him all these same names, including being a MAGA extremist up until about 2 months ago, when he decided that he would rather hold on to his speakership by getting Democrats to vote for him and keep him in office than by serving the views of his own caucus, the views that he spent years pretending to believe in. Now, it is personally striking to me to have watched all this because by somewhat of a coincidence, we interviewed Mike Johnson just a few months before he became House Speaker. It was in July of 2023. We had him on our show. There you see the screenshot. He's over there on the right. There you see Congressman Johnson. He wasn't the feature, the attraction of our show because he was somewhat of an obscure congressman at the time, but I had been watching his work with some degree of admiration. On that day, the FBI director, Christopher Wray, appeared before Congress, and Mike Johnson was relentless and unrelenting in his interrogation of the FBI about all of their attempts to abridge free speech in the United States and to abuse their spying power. And so I had him on my show and he proclaimed himself to be a civil libertarian, a devoted civil libertarian. We talked about how bizarre it was that Democrats had become such admirers of and servants to the U.S. security state, especially when it comes to their efforts to intervene in American politics. The Mike Johnson from July of 2023, who was on this show not even 9 months ago, bears no resemblance to the Mike Johnson who is now depending on Democratic Party votes to cling to his speakership. Here is just a part of the discussion that he and I had on that day. And as I said, the fact that this is the same person who just turned around and became the critical vote enabling a renewal of warrantless eavesdropping with no warrant requirements or any other reforms is mind-boggling, unless you realize that this is how people desperate for power function. They make themselves incredibly accommodating, even abandoning their supposedly core views in order to advance their own political career. If you go back and look at the real-time writings in the late 1940s, when this national security state was created in the wake of World War II with the National Security Act of 1947 and the like, people are very aware that they were doing something rather radical. They were creating a part of the government that was going to operate with great secrecy.
So if you're just listening in audio right now, maybe on freeworld.fm, this is from July 12th of 2023. Glenn Greenwald speaking with Johnson before he became Speaker.
Obviously, the FBI predates that, but the rest of the U.S. security state was created, especially the CIA, during that time. And I think a lot of the powers and postures of those other agencies began to kind of contaminate and infiltrate the FBI. But even if you talk to the people who work in these agencies, they will tell you that what was always inculcated first and foremost in their brains is that you do not use these powers against the American people. The FBI, of course, is a domestic law enforcement agency, but even there, the idea was always the worst possible thing the FBI could do was to use those powers for political ends. You have a lot of these kind of whistleblowers, obviously the one I work with, Edward Snowden at the NSA, others from the NSA who say the reason they're coming forward is because that has been abandoned, that these agencies are now more political actors than they are anything else. What do you make of that critique?
I think that's exactly right. And that is what keeps us up at night, Glenn. We're worried about what has become of these agencies that have such broad and expansive powers.
Do you see what I mean? He's not just saying he's going to vote yes or no. He's saying this issue, this concern is so pressing to me that it keeps me up at night. The secrecy of the FBI, the ability of the U.S. security state to spy on American citizens with no limit. It keeps him up at night, he said, just in July of 2023.
The top law enforcement agency in the country that is supposed to be protecting and serving the American people is being used against them. It's violating the privacy of Americans. It is trampling upon their fundamental constitutional rights.
Now, that is why a couple weeks ago, he said he went into the cone of silence, into the skiff. And he had said, and he even said in front of that elevator, we saw the video, well, I'm aware of so many breaches of people's civil liberties, hundreds of thousands of examples of the alphabet agencies doing this. But then they brought me into the skiff cone of silence, and they showed me how important this national security stuff is. So I'm becoming a consequentialist and Theodoric of York. Broomhilda, fetch more leeches, otherwise known as the FBI and NSA. Totally with them. And they're going to get that building too. Yeah. So obviously it meant nothing. It was just rhetoric at the time. It was convenient. And then the new rhetoric in front of the elevator last week, that was convenient too, because he knew he had already spoken up in the past about the wrongdoings of these alphabet agencies because he was trying to appeal to, you got it, Trump voters. The guy is as slippery. He's even slipperier than a greased eel.
And it goes without check because, what so many people are frustrated about is, they asked me today, why can't you guys get accountability? Why can't you bring some order to this? Well, the political reality is here that people sometimes forget is we only have the majority in one house of Congress right now, and it's a bare majority at that. We don't have in Congress the ability to, indict someone for violating the law or to put them on trial in a court. All we can do is put them on trial in the court of public opinion. That's what the hearings are. And then bring legislative reforms to do our best to ensure that these abuses cannot happen again in the future.
He said the only thing we can do is bring legislative reform to ensure these abuses do not happen again. He becomes speaker. There's pending legislation to do exactly that has bipartisan support to do exactly that, to reform the powers of the U.S. security state so they can no longer spy on us in secret and abuse their spying powers and other powers for politicized domestic ends. He said, that's the thing I'm eager to do because this keeps me up at night. Their ability to abuse their spying powers in secret with no checks. That's what he told me. And then he becomes speaker, and there's legislation that has the support of both parties designed to do precisely what he said he was so eager to do. And then he not only becomes a yes vote, or a no vote rather, on the reforms, a yes vote to renew the powers of no reform, he becomes the primary strategist to ensure that it passes the House. Remember, the reforms, the warrant requirements and the like, failed to pass because it was a vote of 212 to 212. He acted as House Speaker. He made sure to cast a no vote, and that ultimately became the decisive vote. But all along, he was working with the Biden White House and the NSA and the CIA and the FBI to ensure that none of these reforms made it past Congress. Here's the rest of what he told me.
Sure. Ultimately, too, and this is important, we have the power of the purse. And so the FBI, for example, wants this multi-billion-dollar new headquarters. I don't think they deserve that if they can't even show us that they can respect the constitutional rights of the people they're supposed to be serving. It's gotten out of control.
All right, so I'm going to pause it there because you'll see Glenn in this video. Glenn says, he's going to give him the headquarters, and then I think somebody in the studio tells him, no, it was in the package. It's already agreed to. So we'll continue a little more of Glenn Greenwald's good coverage of this.
Do you have any doubt at all that Mike Johnson will now ensure that the FBI gets all the funding they want for their shiny new headquarters that he told me just several months ago? Why wouldn't he switch on that and change that view? He's changed on everything else. If the Biden White House wants something badly enough, if the U.S. security state tells him they need it, he will serve them. And that's why it's not only the case that Democrats are now so eager to save his speakership, it's also very rational for Democrats to do that. Nobody is confused about why they would. Here's Congressman Massey, one of the most principled members of Congress since Ron Paul left, on April 28th, saying the following, quote, Speaker Mike Johnson enlisted a majority of Democrats to override a majority of Republicans so he could, one, pass an omnibus bill that spends more than Pelosi did, including a new FBI building. So he already has actually done that. He's ensured that those funds for the FBI building that he told me just several months ago they don't deserve actually were appropriated to the FBI. 2, reauthorize warrantless spying on Americans. 3, send $60 billion to Ukraine. It's unforgivable. Here is Congressman Massey explaining all of that and why, in part, he decided that he couldn't support Congressman Johnson any longer as Speaker.
You'll see here he's just they had the wrong video clip up, and I forgot it was the Massey quote that he read that brought it to mind. But there's the actual video that Massey took when he was standing next to Matt Gaetz, and other folks went by him who were on their side, and they were just stunned and just disgusted by what this gaggle of goons was doing, waving around the flags that were handed out. And again, Douglas McGregor would like to know who was the young woman who came in and handed out all those flags, and they passed that almost 2 weeks ago now, 10 days ago. So here's a little bit more though, because Glenn gets the proper information towards the end.
That's the video that Congressman Massey attached to his statement, where he was showing that the Democrats in Congress, and I believe there are Republicans here as well, were celebrating Speaker Johnson's success in getting $60 billion more to Ukraine by waving the Ukrainian flag, not the American and the Ukrainian flag, this foreign country's flag inside the American Congress, to show you what a priority it is for these people to keep that war continuing. He also worked with the Biden administration to ensure that the app TikTok would either be banned, which would be the greatest infringement of free speech rights in decades if the US government were to ban the social media app that a third of Americans use voluntarily to communicate with one another and express themselves and organize, or to force a sale of it to a company that will do the bidding of the American government when it comes to things like content moderation. There you see NPR, House approved sell or be banned TikTok measure, attaching it to foreign aid. So there has been a series of steps that Mike Johnson has taken. Obviously, the most accommodating one is the foreign aid package that he led the way in ensuring got to the House floor after spending months vowing he opposed it. From AP on April 21st, quote, the House passes billions in aid for Ukraine and Israel after months of struggle. Next to the Senate, quote, the House has approved $95 billion in foreign aid for Ukraine, Israel, and other U.S. allies in a rare weekend session as Democrats and Republicans banded together after months of hard right resistance over renewed American support for repelling Russia's invasion. With an overwhelming vote Saturday, the $61 billion in aid for Ukraine passed in a matter of minutes, a strong showing as America's lawmakers race to deliver a fresh round of U.S. support to the war-torn ally. Quote, we did our work here, and I think history will judge it well, said a weary Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, who risked his own job to marshal the package to passage. Now, he didn't really risk his own job because of the fact that Democrats had made clear that they were going to protect him in the event he served their number one political interest, not their number one foreign policy interest, their number one political interest, which is feeding that war to ensure that Ukrainians have to die to try and weaken the Russian economy and the military, the opposite of which is actually happening. Here's Congressman Massey again on April 12th, which was the day that the vote happened to renew warrantless eavesdropping thanks to Mike Johnson without reforms, the opposite of what he told me. Quote, this is how the Constitution dies, by a tie vote. The amendment to require a warrant to spy on Americans goes down in flames. This is a sad day for America. The Speaker doesn't always vote in the House, but he was the tiebreaker today. he voted against warrants. Now, obviously,
So I'll just pause it there, and that was the tiebreaker one that I was thinking of. It wasn't the overall additional budget. It was part of the TikTok thing, part of the FISA warrant thing, and so you have all those things lined up. And I think Glenn Greenwald is powerful in his memory. He's powerful in his statements. He elucidates it beautifully. He also then welcomes Jill Stein, and the tie-in to the Speaker of the House is also evident in Glenn Greenwald's welcoming of Jill Stein as the next guest in that particular episode, because, of course, over the weekend on Sunday, Jill Stein was arrested when she went onto a college campus, and she goes into it. I'm not going to show it here, but I highly recommend that you watch what happened to Jill Stein, a 72-year-old woman who had been speaking at a different area not far from the campus. And then someone said, would you like to come over and lend your support to us? We're rallying in favor of a ceasefire for the Palestinians to survive. She goes, sure. She went and spoke, and she goes through the whole story. Perhaps I'll show it tomorrow night. And that I want to use as the transition here, thinking about the very good reporting on Speaker Johnson, because Speaker Johnson has openly stated that he says the president, this is the Speaker of the House, one of the most powerful people in line to become the president if a number of other people should somehow become incapacitated even more than they already are. So he's in line to become president, the Speaker, right? In emergencies when they get knocked out. What's fascinating is that guy knows so little of the Constitution. Either that, or he does know the Constitution and he cares so little about your welfare and being honest to his oath. He openly stated that the president of the United States should send the National Guard to places like Columbia or Yale or Georgetown, right? Or George Washington. He's actually saying that. And there is nothing in the Constitution, as I mentioned last night, that even first allows a National Guard to exist. And if you were to think that the National Guard is the militia, they're under the control of the governors unless there's a declaration of war against a foreign nation state, or one of the other governors requests federal assistance from the federal government because they say either the governor or the legislature of that state say that our constitutional republic is in danger due to invasion, insurrection, or high violence. They have to get the request from the governor. So with that, Mike Johnson, and I was on the phone with someone in Washington today, and I was saying, yeah, it just shows you how ignorant of the Constitution he is. And so this other person said, either that, or he is aware and he doesn't care. I was like, yep, absolutely. That's where my mind goes too. So it just shows you how duplicitous this guy is, Speaker Johnson, to actually say, we don't want what they're doing on the campuses. Now, there's a lot of other stuff mixed into the campuses, the campus protests, the rallies, right? I think they're reaching a point now where it's becoming impossible for outside observers who are seeing footage or anything like that to know what exactly was happening on the ground. Unless you have some really long-term footage, it would actually be wise for some of these kids to post cameras up in trees that can be 24-hour monitoring to show what's going on down there, right? But the footage from what happened to Jill Stein, that's very clear. It conforms with exactly what her story is. So, but the problem is it's becoming very muddy now. You got Soros money going in. You have Israeli money going in to actually pay for agents provocateur. And you've got Soros money going in, supposedly with his open society splinter groups to support the Palestinians. Is he really doing that? I don't know. Does he really support the plight of the downtrodden people who are occupied? Because he helped take land of Jewish people when he was a teenager in World War II, right? Being put, the Nazi put his arm around him, brought him around when his parents were no longer there. Said, okay, you come with me. We're going to take Jewish land. And Soros is Jewish. So how Soros's money is playing into this, I don't know. But there are, I think, some very solid key political, philosophical, and economic, moral points that stand the test of time in all of these instances. And they even cross paths with Supreme Court rulings when it comes to ideas of these large areas like college campuses. So let's now turn to, I think I've got it all set up for you here, this Fox News piece. And I'd like to show you a piece that I derived from Fox News that has a lot of these lessons in it. It's always, I always say it's good when a plan comes around, a plan works out. I said, let's look at Fox News, an early juxtaposition and big collectivist problem looming over everything we discuss, ranging from the campuses to the port building, although that'll come later, to the United States giving money to Israel and the refugee problem. Let's watch as Senator Kennedy appears on Fox News, and at the very beginning of it, watch the juxtaposition. That's why I put an early juxtaposition. Watch the visuals. Now, if you're just listening, then I'll describe it for you. I'll play it and then I'll pause it. Watch the juxtaposition here of images as they show a college campus, and then they flash to something else. Here we go. Here's Fox News.
Overnight across the country, and you're looking at the protests in New Orleans as crews at Tulane University are clearing out what's left of its pro-Palestinian encampment after the SWAT team moved in and quickly moved everybody out. And now you can see what it was like inside there.
They had to clean out 3 buildings at Tulane. They had them closed for 2 days, but now they're open.
All right.
Okay, now this image that is on the screen, these past 2 images, and if you're listening on Free World, you didn't see them. The shot that they opened with on Fox News was from Tulane in Louisiana, okay? And it showed the police. It was a nighttime shot, and it showed the tents from those people that, as that guy, Shai Davidi, got so upset about Columbia, it showed the people who were occupying the campus there, right? Somebody at Fox News inserted, before they went back to the studio, somebody at Fox News in the production side, on the editing side, inserted images from either Rafah or someplace else inside Gaza that is pulverized, just pieces of buildings all over the place. So you've got the images of the tents flipped over and tables that are, with the legs are standing up in Louisiana at Tulane, and then they immediately jump over to what the Israelis have done to the Palestinians. So you see juxtaposition and actually parallelism, because the authorities that went in to disrupt the protesters who were there on this government-supported university campus were pushed out by the police state as they see it, and I think appropriately so. Because if they don't want to pay for the police, what will the police do? And their money, they are protesting. They don't want their money sent to Israel to do more of what whoever it was at Fox put in to show that difference and similarity between what the police did to those people down at Tulane, tearing up their tents, breaking up their gatherings, taking that land back for the state, for what the state deems is acceptable speech. Not that protest. Maybe a BLM protest would be appropriate for them. I don't know. But they took it back. So the power imbalance was shown at Tulane, and then, but it wasn't recognized by the Fox people on stage. But somebody behind the scenes put up these images. Again, I'm going to go back and play it for you again. Here we go.
Overnight across the country, and you're looking at the protests in New Orleans as crews at Tulane University are clearing out what's left of its pro-Palestinian encampment after the SWAT team moved in and quickly moved everybody out. And now you can see what it was like inside there.
They had to clean out 3 buildings at Tulane. They had them closed for 2 days, but now they're open.
All right. Meanwhile, back in Washington, we are now learning.
Now that was that. I don't know if that, I think that was intentional. That was big. And you could actually see, you could sense, what's this woman, Ainsley, whatever, in the middle. you could sort of see that her voice was sort of drawn out, like, okay, back in Washington, like they were confused. Like, what is that image of what Israel is doing in Palestine up there after we showed the police clearing out the protesters who were protesting exactly what's happening in Palestine? That just reinforces the argument of the protesters. I don't think they like that at Fox News. Now, if I've got the wrong impression, you let me know, but I think I don't see any other reason than somebody in the editing booth was like, okay, I'm going to throw this in there. And I bet you they don't have a job now because that was a pretty big deal. Inside Rokfin, let me know your opinions. Inside Rumble, let me know your opinions. And Nancy, thanks for being there. And I really appreciate it that I know you're watching live and you'll catch on the rebroadcast. All my best to you, great lady. All my best. Also, Freegan, thanks for being there. And I'm wondering about Gilligan, Gilligan's Island. Yeah, I don't know. He's making references to Gilligan. I always love that show. Gilligan's Island, what a great show. Okay. And Inside X, if you want to drop your comments as well, and Inside YouTube, you let me know if you think I'm off base or not. But I think somebody did that to show that juxtaposition pretty darn well. Now, let's continue with this coverage, however, because when they bring in the senator, oh, thanks, former Khan. Former Khan! He says, you've been doing yeoman's work, Goldsmith. Thank you. I'll have to wear my my Star Trek red shirt for that. So let's continue with this, I think, and I want to get feedback on you on this, but the syllogistic approach to this, I think, is pretty clear. You've got a logic chain that you follow when you hear the senator speak, and it has a number of different prongs that come off it, but they all come together at the end, and it has to do with collectivism. So here we go.
That the White House is reportedly considering bringing certain Palestinians to the U.S. as refugees to offer them safe haven.
Fantastic. Here to react, Louisiana GOP Senator John Kennedy. Senator, I guess before we even comment on that, your reaction to the way the White House has handled the pervasive unrest on college campuses.
Well, Brian, it should not go unnoticed that President Biden has the ability to stop all of this on a dime. All he's got to do is call the college presidents and say, look, if you don't get control of your campuses, I'm going to withhold your federal money.
Right.
Oh,
now, the
hold on a second there, my friends. Let's talk about that now. All he has to do is call the college presidents and say, if you don't get a handle of this, I'm going to withhold your money. It's not their money. It's your money. Collectivism. This is where we run into one of the major problems. As I said, Jill Stein's 72 years old. How much has she paid in taxes? Can she or can she not say, hey, my taxes have gone to the sustaining and expansion, the upkeep of this campus? I have just as much right to speak here as anybody. The people who are taking care of the grounds, the people who are the administrators making the decisions, they've been partially subsidized by me without my choice, or I'll go to jail if I don't pay those taxes. This is the tragedy of the commons, as I mentioned before. And so you have some people who don't like what's being said on the college campuses. You have other people who do like what's being said on the college campuses. You've got groups pitted against each other. You've got side groups funding various splinter groups, even agents provocateurs. And now you can't even make sense of a lot of the stuff unless you're actually there on the ground, right? Because it's a publicly subsidized place, everybody has supposedly a right to free speech there. And we're going to hear from Judge Napolitano on this in just a little bit, because he makes some excellent points as he spoke with, I think, Phil Girardi. And so if we look at that very closely and we hear what the senator said, he said that Biden can say, I'm going to withhold your money for that. That is the difference between public and private. And this is where I always try to bring up Marsh v. Alabama. Because people who believe that the Marsh v. Alabama decision was an appropriate decision are wrong. It is incorrect. This is the result of the very concept of public spaces. If this were actually a private university, if this were actually privately controlled and they weren't taking public money, but they still had a large green out there, a campus for their students, say it was Hillsdale College, and somebody wanted to protest at Hillsdale College, and they used the Marsh v. Alabama decision, then Hillsdale College would have to accept protests just like this. Because rather than saying, hey, you don't take any public money, they would say, yeah, we know you don't take any public money, but your place is open to the public as we define it. Therefore, since you're allowing people to cross your lawn, since you're allowing people to speak there with each other, non-college student members can meet up with others, sit on the park benches and things like that, even though you might have rules for their behavior, we're going to make the rules for their behavior. We're going to allow anybody there. And there you get exactly the same kind of problem that you get when you get public funding for the colleges. When it's not even government taxpayer funded money, but they define something as a public place, and it doesn't matter if somebody tries to draw a distinction, well, that's for commerce and that's for this. That's the person invading the property saying, I'm coming up with reasons as to why I will leave you alone here and I won't leave you alone there. It's not the invader's decision. It's the private property owner's decision to say, leave me alone. There is a moral precept here that should not be crossed. The difference between taxpayer support that draws in everybody who thinks they have a say, appropriately so, and how it's measured, I don't know, because it's unworkable, because it's tax funded. Who gets what say? 10 times amount of say for 10 times amount of taxes put in over how much time? How much is the expense for what that person wants versus another person? It's unmanageable. This is like the example that I gave a while ago. You supposedly have a right to free speech and journalism, right? Try doing that inside a courtroom where somebody else has a right to a speedy trial. They can't coexist. They don't work. You can't get up in the middle of a courtroom and start singing. It doesn't work that way. And yet you supposedly have a right to free speech. That's because the government is the greatest charade of all time. It's the biggest boondoggle fake out you've ever imagined. They tell you they're there to protect your rights, and the only way that the government can exist is by invading your rights. They tell you that they're there to protect free speech on public grounds. If you're in the public, you have a right to speak, but you can't do that. Not on these publicly subsidized university campuses. Depending upon what they want to hear and they don't want to hear, they'll shut you down. And this is the problem with Marsh v. Alabama. If you're not familiar with the case, Marsh v. Alabama came to the Supreme Court during Roosevelt Court, 1946. It was a shipbuilding company in Alabama, and the company had a campus for their employees. They had little cottages where they could stay overnight. They had a post office, little supermarket. As I've mentioned, very similar in many ways to what the farm stand where I worked did for their Jamaican migrant workers who came up. They had cabins and stuff like that where the guys could stay. That was the McLeod family's property. That was their property. If somebody came up into where the Jamaican guys were staying and wanted to start a barbecue near where the Jamaican guys were trying to sleep or wanted to play a concert or something like that, no way. It's not the interloper's decision as to how that land will be managed, even if there are a bunch of people staying there or working there. That is private property. But the Marsh v. Alabama decision came about because this woman from somewhere around the area came and was handing out religious pamphlets on the campus, on the business campus. And they called the cops to arrest her for trespass. They asked her to leave, and she wouldn't leave. She was, I don't remember, it was like Seventh-day Adventist or something like that. And she wouldn't leave. So they charged her for trespass. She appealed and went to the Supreme Court. The highly collectivist Supreme Court ruled that if it is open to the public, it is so-called de facto or de jure under this legal decision. It is so-called public property, but it's not public property. It's private property. Public property takes your money, and then you have to try to figure out how you can get something out of it as everybody else argues over it, whether it's a school or a park or whatever. That's taxpayer-funded public property. Just because something is open to the so-called public doesn't mean that the people who run it can't change their parameters based on contract, or they might even breach the contract. Then the person who had the original contract can sue them for that. Or they could put up a stipulation saying, at any time, if you enter here, we can come up with new rules to say we don't want you here. Just like somebody entering the home, you enter under my prerogatives. You enter under my stipulations, not yours. Now, you can have your own stipulations. If they want you to join them on their place because, say, it's a restaurant or somebody's having a party, they'd like you to come over, you can say, well, do you protect yourself from, Cowabunga 19? What kind of food do you have? What kind of music? A lot of different preferences, right? Do you smoke? What do you can decide for yourself as well. And they can't rope you in. Imagine if that company had kidnapped that woman and brought her onto the land. Would the government say it's perfectly acceptable for them to keep her there? Of course not. But this is what government does to you when they say that your private property is not private. They kidnap you. They squat on your life. Government is the ultimate squatter. They are the occupier. And so it is amazing the double standards that so many people have, whether it's that guy Shai Davidi who got upset that people were occupying a land in New York while he supports the occupation by Israel of the land in Palestine. It's like, duh. And at the same time, we have people who supposedly support conservative values and things like that, but they will make their own distinctions as to how private property can be used before they decide that it's public property. It's very clear. If there's no tax money being used on it, it's private property. It's not public. Now, again, the facet that hinges on this, where some people can agree to disagree, is whether or not that particular business asked for corporate status from the government. But there I roll into, and I mentioned it in one of my pieces for MRC TV about Tennessee and the gun thing. Then we run into, for the teachers, the permission to allow teachers to use firearms if they go through all these different caveats and get training and do all these things, right? They have a right to carry a firearm. The problem is public property, taxpayer-funded property. The right to keep and bear arms upsets a lot of people who are taxpayers. So you've got a right, but the taxpayers have a right to their property. It's being taken for the school, and the person who's being employed there doesn't necessarily have to ask for a job there. Well, there we get to the unconstitutional conditions portion that I mentioned last night. Unconstitutional conditions, the general idea, you can go to the Ithaca or Cornell law for the citations. They're in my article from MRC TV. It's hyperlinked. And so unconstitutional conditions, the general idea that has come down through most cases, but not all, is that the government cannot force you to give up a constitutional right just because you're getting a government benefit. As I said, I think they would be inconsistent if that were challenged on the supposed security they provide us by the TSA, because they routinely, as part of their job, breach the Fourth Amendment. They also take stuff from us in order for us to get to the planes, which is a breach of the Eighth Amendment. So these are important things to bring up as we look at this story a little bit more from Fox, because we see Senator Kennedy say, well, Biden can just withhold the money. He should just withhold the money and it would stop immediately. So what does that tell us? That tells us that he thinks that government funding for something should come with strings, and that he has the right idea about how that public place should be run. But the protesters and the ralliers there who might have relatives who are being wiped out by government bombs being given to Israel, they have different ideas. So who's going to agree to disagree? If you have a private paradigm, then the universities can handle this. Now, there are a couple other things that I want to bring up real quick. Last night I mentioned that thanks to Schumer about 2 years ago, they passed a statute. And I want to make sure that I phrase this more precisely than last night, because it was just coming to mind last night. The statute stipulates that any company that's doing business with a contract with the federal government cannot divest from investments with Israel. So these universities not only get grants from the federal government, almost all of them, except for Hillsdale and Grove City, they also oftentimes have contracts. As I mentioned, MIT has tons of contracts, right, with DARPA and stuff like that. Harvard's got lots of contracts. They all of them, right? So these college administrators are under a lot of pressure, because if they divest, I should say boycott. If they boycott, if any of these businesses boycott Israel, I should say, then they will not be allowed to get any more federal government contracts. Okay. So the federal government, they find that you've boycotted Israel, then you're not going to get any more contracts. So I don't know how it works to not do business, and somehow the government could call that a boycott. What are they going to, you have to do business with Israel, otherwise it's a boycott. I don't know how they define it. I guess you have to officially say that you're boycotting them. But what if you're just not doing business with Israel? That's part of the problem with Schumer's proposal that they passed a couple of years ago. But you can't boycott Israel, right, if you're a government contractee. Well, what happens with the universities if they divest? Is that going to be considered a boycott? This is one of the prongs of pressure. The other prong of pressure, of course, military-industrial complex. They've got a lot invested in these trusts. They're basically investment facets for the universities, right? Then you've got the Israeli lobby, very big on the congressmen and also on the administrators. Not as big on a lot of the teachers and professors who are there, who seem to be siding more with the pro-Palestinian protesters. So here's a little bit more from Kennedy, because it opens up even more. Check this out.
Done that. The moral of the story is you're never too old to suck. The reason he hasn't done that is because of politics. Yeah. CNN just came out with a poll. It said that 52% of likely voters in America will not vote for President Biden under any circumstances. Any circumstances. They would vote for the guy who salts the fries at McDonald's before they would vote for President Biden. And the White House knows this, so they're scared to alienate the not insubstantial Hamas wing of the Democratic Party. So that's what's behind a lot of this.
Well, Senator, the fries are delicious.
They are good.
That guy does.
I'm not saying that guy's not qualified to be president. I mean, history shows anybody can do it.
You know, Senator, we know the history of the Jewish people and all the persecution over thousands and thousands of years. Where are the people standing up for our Jewish friends? That country, that's our ally. I don't know about you, but I'm getting a little tired of people who actually don't cite history and just spout that line over and over and over again. Just ridiculous. Which Jewish people? It's so stupid. It's so dumb to just spout that line. You know, it's such a platitude. It's ridiculous. Committed to helping them and helping their people. And we're watching and listening to these interviews with Jewish students who can't even walk on their own campuses, have paid $70,000 a year to be able to get an education, and they can't even walk around and feel safe.
Well, I think most Republicans are standing up. Some Democrats are. Many Democrats are scared to. Because, let me say it again, Angel, there's a substantial Hamas wing of the Democratic Party. And they believe in diversity, equity, inclusion, and the right to kill Jews. And some of my Democratic colleagues, not all of them, but they're scared of them. Yeah. Some universities are handling this well. Tulane, Vanderbilt, University of Florida. They have good leadership. I know their presidents. Their presidents passionately support free speech. but they know the Constitution doesn't protect disruptive behavior.
Well, Senator.
Okay, so I'm going to just ask you, hold on to that disruptive behavior line, because many times the way this is portrayed, they portray peaceful protesters or ralliers as disruptive when it's the cops that come in, like what they did to Jill Stein with their bicycles, flipping them at a 72-year-old woman. And it's all on camera. So people are going to be picking and choosing all these different types of things. This is becoming a hot potato to try to get the visual message out there. And it's becoming unmanageable unless someone has some real long-term video footage of this stuff, right? These little clips now are becoming very useless. However, sometimes there is a little nugget that pops out. In this case, I want to check out the next nugget coming as they start talking about the refugees, the Biden proposal to bring over migrants, and listen to what the senator says about Egypt, because this ties it into the university problem. Check this out.
We haven't heard much from the president regarding this, but you know what they could do? And you're on the Senate Judiciary Committee. The Department of Justice should open an investigation into, we've heard that the people who took over the building here in New York, it sounds like they were, for the most part, all the leaders were outside agitators. It sounds like there is some sort of a conspiracy. We had a former federal prosecutor on about 2 hours ago who said they could be charged with conspiracy. They could use RICO stuff. We could figure out who is behind this and who's funding it.
So pause it right there. Does that remind you of what the Democrats were saying about the January 6th ralliers who entered the Capitol? First of all, again, just to remind the Fox News team, people's tax money is being spent on those universities. Whether they go to the university or they don't becomes irrelevant at that point. That's the point. You can't manage a public system. It doesn't work. And the money is unconstitutionally given to them in the first place. So we've got a senator, a Republican senator, saying, oh, he should just threaten to withdraw the money. Hey, Senator, I thought you swore an oath to the Constitution. Rather than using it as leverage to get the speech you think is good or bad removed or added or removed to the college campus, why don't you conform to your vaunted Constitution and stop being such a fatuous man about town regarding where you're going to go and what you're going to do on which clause of the Constitution you think is important? It would be nice if you actually were consistent, but you're not. There's nothing in your Constitution that lets Joe Biden give out or take away somebody else's money for college. It doesn't exist. And it would be nice if you actually went to that point rather than trying to say, I want to see this done on the campuses, and this is how it should be done by Biden. And this is a great example of it. Those taxpayers, they're taxpayers, and if they want to squat on the lawn of some university that received their money, they have a moral okay to do so because their money was taken from them for it.
Well, I don't know about the conspiracy part, though I will say we probably need to get some new conspiracy theories because all the old ones turned out to be true. I do know that President Biden could stop this on a dime. All he's got to do is pick up the phone and quietly call the President of Colombia and say, listen, Madam President, I give you 14 days to get this straight, or I'm going to withhold all of your federal money.
Sure. Right.
And you would see the leadership at Columbia pounce on that like a ninja, man. They would get it straight.
Right, absolutely. And then it would protect them from their crazy boards that don't want them to do anything, Senator. I just got to ask you.
The problem is the faculty. The problem in a lot of these places, not all, but many, it's the faculty.
We're seeing it. They're sitting in the encampments.
Yeah, they think, the faculty members think they're right, and they'll hurt you if you disagree with them.
So, Senator, I just got to get you to comment on the Palestinian situation. So are you encouraged that we're going to start?
You know how the faculty are. They're going to hurt you sitting there, right? I mean, I'm crossing what the Fox News guy said with what Senator Kennedy said, but clearly they're not getting their signals right. Most of these protesters have been peaceful throughout much of this, throughout almost all of this. And now it's becoming too muddy, but the clarity of this distinction between private and public becomes very clear. The clarity of the fact that the Constitution doesn't allow the federal government to hand money out like this, the clarity of the fact that the president can't just call up the National Guard to do this, and the clarity of how unmanageable a Marsh v. Alabama decision from 1946 comes to us right with this. And we'll go to the Egypt story. Here we go.
Bring in Palestinian refugees because I guess we're out of illegal aliens.
So this is the Palestinian refugees thing, and he rolls Egypt into it. Sorry to jump ahead there.
Well, number one, I think Congress is going to have something to say about that, Brian. Number two, those refugees need to go to Egypt. Now, Egypt there was just a big article in The Economist magazine. Egypt will allow Palestinian refugees to come in as long as you pay $5,000.
Okay, so now I'm going to pause it right there. So again, previously we've talked about how Netanyahu was saying, "Oh, the Egyptians should allow those refugees in there, and it's just immoral for them to not allow the people that were bombing and slicing up and destroying all their families to not allow those refugees that we're displacing to go in there." I mean, it's incredibly disingenuous and just pure evil. It's unbelievable and massively hubristic. I mean, imagine how conceited somebody's got to be to say, "Well, I come from this country, but over in that other country, they should definitely accept the people that we're displacing." I mean, it's just like, what are you talking about? And it just shows, I mean, the guy's deranged, right? But what's fascinating about this is, we talked about it here on Liberty Conspiracy previously. That arrogance is just stark. It's like being blinded by the sun. Like, what did I just see? That was amazing. You're telling the Egyptians that they got to bring in more of the people you're displacing? You're a scumbag. Jeez, 'em. So obviously he thinks he can rule Egypt, right? And Kennedy does the same thing here. He's like, the Egyptians should bring them in, but they're charging $5,000 per person. Can you imagine? But he adds something to this, and it shows you again how corrupt things are. And it ties into the money going to the universities, where Washington says we should have some say over what they say on the universities. We rule those universities. We can control and describe what is good or bad speech there. And Joe Biden should say, shut down that speech, but leave that speech going, or we're going to withhold your money, right? Watch this when he talks about Egypt. This is amazing. And it all ties together. The incredible blindness to their own arrogance, their own hegemonic claims of power through the redistribution of your tax money. Now he translates it into U.S. power over Egypt. Check it out.
Okay? That's unacceptable. We give billions of dollars to Egypt. The IMF bails them out every other Thursday with our permission. President Biden needs to call Egypt and tell them to do their part.
But the problem is the Palestinians create unrest in every country they go into, including Egypt. And they say we're not going to be that.
So, it's interesting. He says the Palestinians create unrest in every country they go into. I think what he means is the Palestinians create unrest in every country to which they are moved after they've been forcibly removed from their homes. I don't know. I just, it's kind of crazy to actually look at it realistically. But, when they were there before 1947, I don't know, they weren't jumping all over the place and being moved in boats to different countries and having the president of one nation state call up somebody to say, you better bring these refugees in and not charge them $5,000 as, your Israeli neighbors blast them to pieces. I don't know. It's kind of strange. It wasn't happening. But for some reason now, as they discuss bringing in refugees to the United States from the place that the United States has been helping to destroy, I don't know, people are a little worried. Maybe they'd be a little upset. What a crazy, it's absolutely nuts. And this guy Kennedy is not one of the worst guys out there, right? He's done great stuff, holding people's feet to the fire on the climate things and stuff. He exposes a lot of people. He goes through a lot of logical what do you call it? Taekwondo or something like that, right? A lot of logical martial arts. He does that, but he's not being logical here because he has certain assumptions that are very, very clear, that the United States can tell foreign governments that they have to accept people because, of course, the United States gives them money, or that the president can, because the United States government gives universities money, tell the universities what kind of speech is acceptable or what isn't acceptable on their campuses. So it's a pretty amazing clip to see, and I was blown away by just how much it reveals. So I'd like to ask you, what other questions can one ask to draw out greater learning there? So put your comments into X or Rokfin or Rumble, and I appreciate everybody being so kind as to watch. And former con member says the enemy is the current rally cry. Oh, Occult Priestess, thanks for being there. Absolutely. Great to see you. And Freegan's over. He says, Gard. Oh, hey, thanks, Freegan. Gard is a genius at parallelism. Paralleling anarchist philosophy alongside pure and proper conservatism. The pragmatic approach to operationalizing an anarchist society optimally manifests as conservatism. Well, that's a pretty darn good point, especially, I think, Freegan, if you can separate things into smaller, decentralized areas of control. That's why I like, the old tribal system of the Brehon Law and the Viking Age Iceland system and stuff like that. And, I usually bring them up. It's fascinating writing by great people like Kevin Flanagan and so on. So now, for a little bit of something, I think I'm just going to go with this just real quick. A couple quick news stories to tell you as a little bit of a palate cleanser from that stuff. Then I want to go back to it because there's some other big stuff there. But I made some notes here because I did want to mention that down in Congress, you might have seen this. Members of the EcoHealth Alliance are actually testifying on Capitol Hill, and also there's a very good piece. If you'll find this on my Twitter/X, and I might play it tonight, but I'll probably play it tomorrow as I focus more on economic stuff. And I might even have to switch that tariff thing into tomorrow. I'm going to try to do the tariff thing tonight, but it would actually go very well with the tariff thing to show the pressures that political machinations put on your wallet and your plans and the plans for your kids. 45%, says Pete St. Onge, is the new proposed capital gains tax from Joe Biden. 45% capital gains tax. And that the stuff is already taxed on the corporate level. It's already taxed as an income tax, and then they want to tax it again. And don't forget, certain people want to tax you for unrealized capital gains. In other words, you haven't made any money. You haven't sold it. It just went up in value and you're still holding it. They want to tax that. Talk about destroying savings. Just ridiculous. Now let's jump into something that is a semi-palate cleanser, although you might find the person rather distasteful from many of his positions in the past. Here's the question that I pose. Is this person better than AOC? Perhaps, but Michael M's inconsistency remains consistent. Who's the subject here? Well, folks, I know. It's the beautiful mind of Michael Moore, who was on CNN talking, in this case, kind of the right way, I think, about Palestine. But again, approaching it the way AOC did in that clip we showed last night, first from the political standpoint, not the moral standpoint, talking about how this is going to hurt Joe Biden. Young people aren't going to vote for him because of Palestine. Check this out. But he's not as bad as AOC. Check it out.
With what Netanyahu has done here, and you can stop the killing tonight. You pull the plug, you close the bank, you shut it down. Doesn't mean we're not going to support Israel, protect Israel. Absolutely.
Yeah, there you go.
Today, 81% of voters who are under the age of 35 disapprove of how President Biden has been handling this war. I mean, we're seeing it on campuses. There is a question of what we're going to see in November. I wonder what you think he should be doing differently to change those numbers.
Thank you for asking that question, Caitlin. This is why I was so, when I got the call asking if I'd like to come on tonight, I really was coming on. I know we're speaking.
That showed today 81%
sorry.
of voters
Yeah, I
who
had
are
to
under the age
duplicate
of
it again, sorry.
35 disapprove of how President Biden has been handling this war. I mean, we're seeing it on campuses. There is a question of what we're going to see in November. I wonder what you think he should be doing differently to change those numbers.
Thank you for asking that question, Caitlin. This is why I was so, when I got the call to ask if I'd like to come on tonight, I really was coming on. I know we're speaking to millions of people, but I'd like to speak to one particular individual, and that is President Biden. I wanted to say this on your show tonight, that his chance of not being reelected, I think at this point is so great because of those numbers, because he's losing the youth vote. He's lost the Arab American vote in Michigan. So even Michelle Goldberg, in a column in the New York Times last month, said that you lose Michigan, you lose the election. I am fighting to make sure that doesn't happen. I am trying to save Joe Biden, because as soon as he does the right thing, as soon as he, and if you're listening, watching Mr. Biden, fellow Catholic, although some will say recovering in my case, but still, we are Catholics, and the Pope is right on this. We need an immediate ceasefire. It is wrong. A mass.
Okay, so right there, I want to pause it, and I want to be as fair as possible to him. And it's actually a good thing that that little clip showing him talking about the morals part of it, which came in the latter part of what he said on CNN here. It actually is good that it came in, and I forgot to sort of splice that out. I had to do some editing on it because when I was recording it, they kept having ads pop up. So I had to find, once you know how it is, sometimes you run a video, and then if you run it again, that ad won't pop up the second time because you've already run through it. So you've already seen the ad, so you can watch it clean. So that's what I had to do a couple times on this one. But in this case, what I think is interesting here is she introduces the poll numbers, right? So she sort of steers the conversation in that direction. And then he gets into the moral aspect of it. And I have many disagreements with Michael Moore. I have some agreements with him on some peace things, okay? Unfortunately, he hasn't been consistent on a constitutional level. He's doing a good job here, and he gets into how Joe Biden is losing support because she brings up the polling, and he makes a very good point. But if you notice right in here, I'm just going to play this little bit again here. Okay, just go back just a little bit here. All right, here we go. If you notice, this is where he goes with this trajectory.
So great because of those numbers, because he's losing the youth vote. He's lost the Arab American vote in Michigan. So even Michelle Goldberg, in a column in the New York Times last month, said that you lose Michigan, you lose the election. I am fighting to make sure that doesn't happen.
Now, my question is, why would he want to fight to make sure that the man who already has fed these weapons to Israel knowingly, now maybe he doesn't have the information that we've been covering here, all the internal reports, all the different people from USAID who say, yes, they're starving people, but he can see what's been going on there. He can see the pulverized cities. He can see the way they move people down into Rafah, and now they're going to attack Rafah. He can see procedurally what they have done step by step to eradicate these people, how they don't distinguish between civilians and Hamas. They never tell us which ones are the Hamas guys. They lie all the time. And of course, they're unconstitutionally getting the weapons. So there are so many levels that he could address here, and he could have addressed them a long time ago. And yet he wants Joe Biden to get reelected. I don't understand that. Now, this is one of these areas where, there are many areas where I really don't like what Michael Moore did in his Bowling for Columbine film, what he did to Charlton Heston, the way he selectively edited certain things and deceived people in many, many ways. What he did personally to Charlton Heston, going to his house and not leaving Charlton Heston's house as Mr. Heston invited him in to have lunch and talk about firearms and then asked him to leave. And he and the camera people wouldn't leave. Heston left his own house and walked down the street. That's what a courageous guy Charlton Heston was. And what a nice, friendly, noble person he was to invite these guys in and make them lunch. So I don't like that. Okay. There's room for, people to discuss, to say, hey, what do you feel bad about having done that? Do I have the wrong impression here? But that's a pretty well-known story. And I've seen the footage from the film, and there are a bunch of other things that he deceived people with in Bowling for Columbine. And there are other things he's done that have been deceptive in other films as well. But his stance on 9/11 has been pretty good, and his stance in other areas slightly pretty good sometimes. He goes over, unfortunately, into the idea that the federal government should have some say over what happens in Flint, Michigan, over the pipes and so on. So he takes a tragedy there and misinterprets where the federal government should step in, that sort of stuff. So, he doesn't understand the constitutional idea of decentralization and federalism, as well as many of the people that I really admire on, many issues. So he's screwed up on those things many, many times. And here, this is what's missing. First, my question to Mr. Moore would be, not Dennis Moore, although this guy is very much in favor of redistribution of wealth. And he hasn't learned his lesson the way Dennis Moore did at the end of the skit, is why do you want to see Joe Biden reelected? At what point are you going to say Joe Biden is complicit and has been complicit? Why would you morally give your thumbs up to that guy? I don't understand that. And it's not a matter of, well, I think the other guy would be worse. That's not a consideration. You are giving your moral acceptance and your moral promotion to see this man reelected, to promote him to more success on the ballot box. How can you do that? How can you tie yourself morally to this man who already has shown to stand so completely against what you think is right? And he's not just he's not being erroneous and making what is it in baseball? An error, he's intentionally doing this, and it's incredibly corrupt. So why you'd want to reelect that guy, I don't know. The other part of this is that he's not getting the deeper part, which is the Constitution. He could mention, if he believes and calls himself an American and waves the American flag in some of his videos, he could mention that there's nothing in the Constitution to do this in the first place. But he doesn't do that because he is very much in favor of redistribution of wealth. In fact, I looked it up. He was very much in favor of giving weapons to Ukraine. So there you go. He's spoken out many times in favor of defense of Ukraine and calling the Russians the bad guys, of course, because that allows him to criticize Donald Trump and claim that there was influence in the election, which there wasn't. So there you go.
Save Joe Biden, because as soon as he does the right thing, and if you're watching Mr. Biden, fellow Catholic, although some will say recovering in my case, but still, we are Catholics, and the Pope is right on this. We need an immediate ceasefire. It is wrong. A mass slaughter of innocents, of children, of women, of the elderly is a sin. It is absolutely against what we believe in. I know you know that too. I know that's why you're not really happy with what Netanyahu has done here. And
it's just, I think I'll stop it there because that's absurd to even say. The idea that Joe Biden isn't happy with what Netanyahu has done is pretty removed from reality, from all evidentiary hearings in somebody's brain. Okay, sorry, Michael, but if I were hanging out with you, which I really wouldn't do, I've tried to sort of resist what I used to find. I just wouldn't even want to talk about the guy. He upset me so much because I had personal contact with Charlton Heston. He was an amazingly noble person to me. And I didn't like what he did. But, you try to forgive, give people second chances. I got to keep you at arm's length there, man. It's just not happening. Now, I want to get to the story that I thought would be, my great breakthrough for the day. Oh, people won't have seen this one. I can't wait. Well, this is going to end up being a recap for some of you. Hopefully for some, it'll be new. It's about the port, the building of the port. And I do think it's just incredible to consider this, everybody. Let me give you a number of very big things and an extended cut from Judge Napolitano tonight because, and before we even go into the port thing, I want to show you Dave DeCamp and another reason why some people might maybe want to protest Israel. Check this out. We went through this a little bit yesterday. Here's some more.
All right, so the next one here, Smotrich calls for total annihilation of Gaza cities. So Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich on Monday called for the total annihilation of Rafah and other cities in the Gaza Strip. Smotrich said, quote, "There are no half measures. Rafah, Deir al-Bala, Nusrat, total annihilation. You will blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. There's no place under heaven," end quote. So his reference to Amalek there is from a line in Deuteronomy, a book in the Hebrew Bible. And Amalek is a nation that the ancient Israelites were commanded to destroy. And in the book of Samuel, the Israelites were told to slay both man and woman, infant and suckling. And we've seen Netanyahu refer to Amalek before too, compare Gaza to Amalek. And this has been cited as evidence of genocidal rhetoric in South Africa's case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. And, you know, these are Bible, parts of the Bible that are very, people, Christians and Jews usually are hesitant to talk about because it's kind of a difficult topic to explain, to understand. But here you have these Israeli officials frequently using it. I think some other officials have said it as well, pointing to one of the most violent parts of the Bible and comparing it to what they're doing in Gaza. And of course, the annihilation of Rafah would mean the death of over 1 million civilians who are sheltering there. And Smotrich also said that any hostage deal with Hamas would be a humiliating defeat for Israel. He said, quote, "Don't wave a white flag. Don't let Sinwar humiliate us again and win the war. A government that submits to international pressure and stops the war in the middle will, at the moment, lose its right to exist," end quote. So he also called for the destruction of Hezbollah in Lebanon, saying that Israel must, quote, "clear out, with God's help, one blow, wicked Hezbollah in the north, and really send a message that what will happen to those who harm the Jewish people is the same as those who have tried to harm us in the past. They will be destroyed, 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 and it will echo for decades to come," end quote.
So there you go. I thought that I would give that to you. Now, again, that is the first. That's Smotrich, the finance minister of Israel, very, very close to Benjamin Netanyahu. And then you've got Netanyahu's statements, Smotrich speaking about Amalek, Netanyahu already talking about from the river to the sea, and comparing Gaza to ancient days in the Bible of the enemies of Israel. So, the idea that the Israelis are the good guys here. No, Hans, are we the baddies? Yeah, you're the baddies. So I find it quite interesting because if you listen to talk radio, I've heard some people try to bring these points up. The hosts poo-poo this, and then they hang up on them. It reminds me of when I called Sean Hannity, and I said, the United States is invading Iraq. There's no declaration of war. And he said, well, it depends what your definition of war is. I was like, and I said to him, what are you, Bill Clinton? And then he hung up. I was like, it's in the Constitution. It has a very clear definition. It's a state declaration of war with a capital W, and it's against state agents. That's the point there, Sean, Mr. I got the American flag on my lapel 24 hours a day. And by the way, I noticed former con member mentioned Charlton Heston. Chuck and Jerry Doyle, both great acts from men. I do miss both of them. Yeah, Jerry Doyle was pretty cool. He was best known as security chief Michael Garibaldi on Babylon 5. And from what I know, he was a pretty pro-liberty guy. He had that talk show and stuff before he passed away. And I used to enjoy listening to him. And at first, I didn't know who he was. I was like, wow, this guy's pretty good. And then I realized, oh, it's the dude from Babylon 5. Wow, cool. That was a good show. Good show. Good script writing in that one. Also at Rumble, we got Birdhouse Blues dropping a little Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers Refugee in there. I was thinking about playing that one. I haven't used that yet. And we've got Total Annihilation from Cheap time. I don't know what that is. Yeah. Birdhouse says, I saw the protesters heckling Biden while he was in church. LOL. Oh, but he's such a staunch Catholic, right? Yeah, absolutely. So now let's turn to the story that I brought up that I thought that I got early and I was going to, lay it down for you and just be a super surprise. But no. Here's the Washington Examiner. Austin, that is Lloyd Raytheon Austin, and Matt Gaetz spar over boots on the ground regarding Gaza pier. So there's a little image for you. The two titans battling it out. Battle of the Gargantuans, that movie from Japan. That was a fun movie. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin and Representative, so-called, Congressman Matt Gaetz, Republican of Florida, sparred over whether the U.S. forces who will be on the pier off Gaza's coast for humanitarian aid constitute having boots on the ground in the Strip. Okay. Look at the way they phrase that at the Washington Examiner, because they're all still in favor of the United States government being involved with that. Now, I got the footage. I went over, heard about this morning. I was like, I wonder if Forbes has it, because Forbes usually has this stuff. And sure enough, they did. What I didn't know was everybody else was getting it too. Everybody from Redacted to Judge Knapp. Check it out. Here we go. This is Matt Gaetz grilling Lloyd Austin and setting him up for a very simple couple chess moves to make him look quite foolish, with actually exposure something very, very important. Here we go.
Rokfin just said there'll be about 1,000 U.S. service members operating a pier system off of Gaza. How many of them will have guns, Mr. Secretary?
Well, typically all of the deployed service members carry guns, and they have the ability to protect themselves if challenged.
So if someone from land in Gaza shoots at our service members who are on the $320 million pier that we're building, you're telling me our service members can shoot back?
They have the right to return fire to protect themselves. Now,
well, do we think that's so now I want to move to the likelihood that you think someone from land in Gaza might shoot at our service members on this pier. Do you think that that's a likely scenario?
That's possible, yes.
This is a very telling moment, Mr. Secretary, because you've said something that's quite possible that could happen, right? Shots from Gaza on our service members, and then the response, our armed service members shooting live fire into Gaza. That is a possible outcome here so that we can become the Port Authority and run this pier. Right?
That's correct. I expect that we will always have the ability to protect ourselves. Don't you think that counts as
boots on the ground? President Biden told the country that we weren't going to have boots on the ground in Gaza.
And we won't.
Okay, but you guys parse the distinction between, like, when Americans think boots on the ground, they think Americans in harm's way or engaged actively in a conflict. You guys seem to be sort of saying that boots on a pier connected to the ground, connected to service members shooting into Gaza, doesn't count as boots on the ground?
It does not.
I think you're going to find the American people have a different perspective on that. And if we're going to...
This is classic. Oh, man. Well, it does not. Man, you are just a scumbucket sometimes, Mr. Lloyd. Just unbelievable. I can't, that just blew me away. It does not. First of all, they're not supposed to be building the pier. United States soldiers aren't supposed to be there. There's no declared war, and you shouldn't be taking people's tax money to build the stinking pier in the first place. Nor should the United States government be giving the weapons to Israel or anything. Anything, not even food aid is supposed to be handed out to anybody, right? Then you got the pier argument. Well, yeah, it's like, so let me get this straight. If the pier has, let's say, some dust on it, is that the ground now, even though it's over the water? Or if, like, let's say they're on a bridge inside Gaza, going over like a stream, is that boots on the ground or boots over the stream? What a dumb thing to say. What a stupid stance. Just amazing. It just blows me away. So now I want to turn to the people at Redacted. I want to see if I can find this in Redacted. I'm going to have to just check on this one and rejigger the Redacted team here because they covered this as well. And this blew me away. I was all set for the show, and Redacted had it. I'm like, oh, Redacted's nailing it. I'm like, oh wait, I'm covering that too. So here it is. Let me see if I can find this for you. The Redacted team just absolutely nailing it. Let me see if I've got this here. Where is it? I got to scroll through. Make sure I can get it. They found it pretty darn amusing too. Oh man, it's just glorious. Oh man, they're so funny. These people are amazing. All right, and yes, okay, all right. And they even have some good stuff in there from Ron Paul. Ron Paul and Danny McAdams are awesome on this one too. So let me serve this up to you folks. A little something, a little pre-dinner, a little appetizer here. I think I got this covered, hopefully. And okay, I'll try to bring it up here. Let me get this rolling here for you. And the statement from Ron Paul also has a very good observation in it as well. And we got to get through these fake commercials here. Yeah. Okay, here we go. All right, here we go. Check it out.
Blinken's side, and Blinken is in Israel as we speak. What is really going on here? What do they want us to think about what's happening in the United States? There's a bigger game of chess being played here. Think deeply about this and then ask, why also are Israeli lobbying groups also funding counter-agitators? They didn't get much coverage of this, of course, but this is absolutely happening, which was well documented a few weeks ago by Gray Zone's Max Blumenthal. Yes, the same strategy as Soros, but on the other side. What's the purpose of funding both sides of this fight? I don't know. Three-dimensional chess. Max Blumenthal has a question, though. Will all of these mass protests prompt the DNC to hold the 2024 convention remotely, as Biden did with his entire 2020 campaign, walled off, and a walled-off inauguration ceremony? Good question, right? It's a perfect cover. We can't have a DNC because of protests. So Biden is protected. We'll keep him in a cloister. You won't be able to ask him questions.
Right.
You won't get to see any of it. And it's an interesting point. I don't think that's the full picture and story of it. Who cares about a DNC at this point? But it's certainly food for thought, right? Meanwhile, turmoil continues to engulf college campuses. Natalie's going to talk more about it in a second. Coast to coast right now, from UCLA to Columbia to NYU. Late last night, police entered Columbia University's campus and removed pro-Palestinian demonstrators who had occupied the administration building roughly 20 hours before. Of course, again, as we pointed out, they were not Columbia students. So who are they? This happened under NYC Mayor Eric Adams, by the way. And he held a press conference about it, said he was really happy about it. He said, these outside agitators coming into our city, we won't stand for it. And he actually referenced Black Lives Matter movement, people coming in from outside and being involved in these things. George Soros funded as well. Seen here, Eric Adams is, by the way, just if you're unsure who Eric Adams is, he's the one on the left. The one on the right is his boss. So the NYPD last night then posted this after they successfully cleared out Hamilton Hall. They posted this on their social media to show their support of Israel.
All right, let me just pause here because I want to make sure I get the right spot for you. That was very valuable stuff to have in there, but I just want to advance it a little bit so we get to the right spot for you about what's going on with the port and all that stuff. So yeah, I think I've got this. Let me sure. Yeah. Okay. So here we go. Here's the Lloyd Austin bit. Okay. Here we go. This is great. And they go through the gets Lloyd Austin stuff again.
Rokfin just said there'll be about 1,000 U.S. service members operating a peer system off of Gaza. How many of them will have guns, Mr. Secretary?
Well, typically all of the deployed service members carry guns, and they have the ability to protect themselves if challenged.
So if someone from land in Gaza shoots at our service members who are on the $320 million pier that we're building, you're telling me our service members can shoot back?
They have the right to return fire to protect themselves. Now,
well, do we think that's like? So now I want to move to the likelihood that you think someone from land in Gaza might shoot at our service members on this pier. Do you think that that's a likely scenario?
That's possible, yes.
This is a very telling moment, Mr. Secretary, because you've said something that's quite possible that could happen, right? Shots from Gaza on our service members, and then the response, our armed service members shooting live fire into Gaza. That is a possible outcome here so that we can become the Port Authority and run this pier. Right?
That's correct. You know, I expect that we will always have the ability to protect ourselves.
Boots on the ground? President Biden told the country that we weren't going to have boots on the ground in Gaza.
And we won't.
Okay, but you guys parse the distinction between, like, when Americans think boots on the ground, they think Americans in harm's way or engaged actively in a conflict. You guys seem to be sort of saying that boots on a pier connected to the ground, connected to service members shooting into Gaza, doesn't count as boots on the ground?
It does not.
I think you're going to find the American people have a different perspective on that. And if we're going to have people shooting into Gaza, we probably should have a vote on that pursuant to our war powers.
Oh, my God.
Okay, no.
So is this like the new, I see this new tactic of where we don't declare war. I mean, not that we declare war anyway, but we just move soldiers into an area. And then when people shoot at them, they're like, well, they shot at us first. So we had to return fire.
Exactly.
This is, right. This is the plan.
But no,
and this
it makes it literally a game of floor is lava. Like, I'm not touching the actual ground.
Or when our kids.
And this is one of the major reasons why I wanted to show that little bit from Redacted, because they nailed it. They're intentionally putting these people in a situation where they can draw out a false flag and have something done to American troops on the ground. We'll continue.
Kids are walking,
floating on a pier.
Don't touch the crack.
Yeah.
Don't touch the crack.
If I can just somehow get on pogo sticks or something, doesn't count.
So 1,000 American soldiers there. And yeah, we're going to be shooting live fire. And he admits openly that this is the case. Brick Suit, I like this tweet. Austin would straight up outfit all American troops with Crocs, deploy them in the middle of Gaza, and then claim we don't have boots on the ground, just Crocs. Austin is just flat out lying with semantics. Ron Paul, my political hero, is not having any of this. He says, former presidential candidate Ron Paul, says sending 1,000 U.S. troops to build a pier in Gaza turns them into sitting ducks. And of course, this is exactly what the Biden administration wants. The Biden administration has openly talked about how it's only a matter of time before American soldiers are killed. So what is all of this about? Of course, it's all about power. It's all about oil, and it's about stealing these resources. Paul says the real problem is that we're funding this war. We're funding it. He says, forget about just the boots on the ground for a second. We're sending all of our money to fund this genocide and this war over there. And we're not taking care of America at all. Watch.
You know, they're talking about boots on the ground, and that is important. But it is sort of unnecessary to think that is the big problem. How about our money landing over there, the stuff we buy, the weapons we buy, the financing of all the violence over there? That is where the real problem is. So, yes, we don't have the soldiers with their boots on the ground there. We're going to put them on a pier to make sure that we don't look like we're vacillating and not knowing what we're doing.
Yeah. So let us know your thoughts on this in the comments below. But, you know, Anthony Blinken is still in Israel. We're going to see where this.
Excellent stuff. And to round things off tonight on the show, everybody, I have plans for an extended cut from Judge Napolitano's conversation with Phil Giraldi. And I think I'm going to play some fairly large segments of that and just let it run because it's so good. It's Judge Napolitano stuff, so I want to comment on it, get your thoughts on it, and so on. It's just exceptional. It's very, very good. But remember, Redacted is on Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. They're also on YouTube, but if you watch on Rumble, you will get uncensored. And oftentimes they have to jump over if they're talking about Jabberwocky on YouTube. So they have to go to Rumble. So check out their Rumble channel. It's Redacted News, Monday through Thursday. Clayton and Natalie Morris, just an amazing team. And their producers are brothers, David and Richard. So they're David and Philip. And they're excellent. So they always have great people on. I also highly recommend The Gray Zone, Aaron Mate, and Max Blumenthal. Just awesome. Judge Napolitano's been doing a great job. Glenn Greenwald, Kim Iverson. so many good people that are, pretty high profile now. A lot of people are catching on to them. So that's great. And, who knows, maybe, one of you will be starting up one of those shows that really starts to get some traction. Who knows? Maybe this show will get that sort of traction someday. We'll see. But it's just so good to know that people are getting this information and they're gaining ground in joining others to find some of these sites and ours. And, it's just great. You look at what David Knight has been able to do after leaving InfoWars. It's just remarkable. It's amazing. So let's talk about a guy who left Fox News and is doing it himself. And that is, of course, Judge Andrew Napolitano. Now, as you see on the screen here, Phil Giraldi is a Vietnam veteran. He's worked in Army intelligence and then went into the CIA. And this conversation begins with some talk about his experiences as a young guy getting into the Vietnam War and then realizing that it was a mistake and it was immoral, it was unconstitutional. And then they go into Ukraine. And the reason I wanted to start this with some of this stuff going from Vietnam into Ukraine is he has some reflections about what is happening in Ukraine with some of those soldiers, and they're defecting. And it's he is not the only one to report this. I've read numerous reports about this. There are a lot of defections happening, a lot of people who are just not going to be picking up their firearms. And I do think that Zelensky is in the last, say, 6 to 8 months of this, as far as I can see. I could be wrong, but I think that's why they're trying to set something up before the elections to give some sort of funding deal, and then he's going to sue the United States, giving some 10-year funding deal, and then he'll sue for peace with Russia. So here we go.
We see going on, but they're idealistic and they want to do something about it.
He's talking about the students protesting right now, and then draws that into the 60s protests and then over to Ukraine.
And this is a good thing, and I think it's putting pressure on the politicians. It seems to be having a mixed effect on the universities themselves and the university administrators, but I think it's a good thing. I was of drafty age during the Vietnam War and was indeed drafted after I graduated from college, and I saw all the demonstrations in Chicago that took place when the Democratic Convention took place there. And at that time, I was kind of mixed up on what I felt about the war and so on and so forth, and gradually realized that it was wrong from the beginning, wrong as it was being waged, and wrong after it was over. But it takes a certain level of understanding to do that. But I think it's wonderful what the young people are doing, and I would encourage them to keep it up.
Why are university administrators determined to suppress this one political attitude that the IDF is wrong, that Israel is a genocide state, that Israel is conducting, that Israel is an apartheid state conducting genocides? Does it have anything to do with the donors to the universities?
It has certainly, in some cases, has had quite a bit to do with the donors who have said that they're going to stop giving large sums of money to the universities. They said that in the case of Harvard and also the University of Pennsylvania. So that is indeed part of it. But there's also considerable pressure coming from the federal government, which administers, remember, a lot of the funds that wind up in research, particularly in the research universities, the big universities, and has a lot of control over where that money goes. So these administrators are running scared. And that's why we saw these ridiculous performances when they were groveling in front of Congress, which was basically asking them things that Congress has no right to be asking. These were very subjective questions, expecting a certain line of answers, which is, right, of course, that there was anti-Semitism everywhere, and that basically what's going on in Gaza is an example of good against bad, and we know who the good and the bad are.
So I'm a graduate of Princeton University. The president of Princeton, who's an acquaintance of mine, is a professor of constitutional law and a lawyer. He has decreed that if you want to speak out on the campus, you can only do it in the time and in the place and in the manner of which he approves. If you go to another part of the campus and speak out against it, you'll get kicked out, suspended. If you persist, you'll be expelled. Put aside the issue of the contract between the students' parents and the university. The federal government, the same federal government that is intimidating these college presidents, is charged with enforcing the law. And the law says if you accept money from the federal government, you have to respect the First Amendment. The law in New Jersey has a very, very, very liberal, open, broad public accommodations policy. So the green in front of Nassau Hall, the main public part of Princeton University, if you're familiar with it, is a public place where anybody can walk and say anything they want at any time of day about any subject matter. That's the law in the state of New Jersey.
So again, there we go. That's why I brought up Marsh v. Alabama. Again, public money being used for something, that makes it public. It's taxpayer supported, that makes it public. Private institutions can go by their own decisions, how harsh they want to be, how open they want to be to visitors, whatever, and then people respond based on whether there's been a breach of contract or they've been manhandled or something like that, or they just don't like the policies. You have choice, they have choice. With government, nobody has choice except the people who can get control, and then they will choose, they will pick. And that's what we're seeing on the college campuses right now. That's why everybody's trying to infiltrate. That's why everybody's trying to influence. And of course, that's why Senator Kennedy is calling for the president to unconstitutionally change the parameters under which the unconstitutional money will or will not be given to these universities. The free speech zones of the universities don't have to be necessarily free speech zones if we recognize them as private property zones. And then the speech actually is freer because people get to decide what they want said on their own property.
It's not being enforced. The federal government is not enforcing its agreements with Princeton, and the state of New Jersey is not protecting the freedom of speech in these public places. Why is this happening?
It's happening because the government feels it can get its way by exerting pressure on these various entities. And it's as simple as that. We have a whole lot of stuff going on right now that is basically attacking the First Amendment, and let's throw in the Fourth Amendment too. And all this stuff is happening right as we speak. The Anti-Semitism Act that's going through Congress right now will basically limit what people can say on certain subjects. And it will also set up a system of anti-Semitism monitors at most universities. So this is incredible. It's thought police of the worst type. It's a complete denunciation of the values that our founders saw as essential, given what was going on with the British Crown, telling people what they could say, what they could do, with whom they could associate. We're doing the same thing here now. And I'm awfully surprised that there's not a lot more unrest among we older people, we older than the students, about what is going on, because our fundamental rights are being stripped from us one at a time. And it's incredible what's going on. So this is nothing new.
Did you come across in your research a leaked memo or email or text from management at the New York Times telling reporters and editors to use certain words and to avoid certain phrases?
That's a good memory, very key. Anti-war brought that up. We mentioned it on the show, and this is part of the reason. Again, I don't want to say, oh, I put this in here, but yeah, I wanted to make sure people got to see this. It's just this Judge Napolitano is just really doing a great job. Isn't it great? It's awesome.
When describing what's going on in Gaza and the reaction to it by young people and by anybody in the U.S.?
Yeah, there was, in fact, a leaked document, presumably leaked by someone with a conscience who was working for the New York Times. It must have been hard to find. But anyway, it prohibited, it was an editorial comment prohibiting or advising that certain words should never be used in any writing about what's going on in Gaza. and it include words like occupation was not to be included. And the one that surprised me most, they didn't even want the word Palestine to be used, because that would imply that Palestine has a sovereignty and a state entity. It exists as a state entity, and clearly the New York Times does not want to remind people, or to people start thinking that Palestine might actually be, you know, where people live and would like to lead their own lives in a way that is satisfying to them, and not a place that's occupied by an alien army.
Palestine, of course, is a country, according to every country in the world in the UN, but 5 of them, led, of course, by the United States. Palestine is a recognized member of the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice. The New York Times is telling reporters and editors not to use the word?
Yeah, that's what they're doing.
Right. Is Israel trying to stifle dissent in the United States by various means, painting dissenters as anti-Semites and various other means?
Well, I would say they're not trying to stifle dissent. They are stifling dissent. They own Congress. They own the White House. They own most of the media. And that's why we're seeing the same point of view, same narrative coming across all the time. I personally, my personal favorite is when they refer to these college kids demonstrating as pro-Hamas terrorists. I mean, you know, terrorist is really a loaded word. People can be sent to jail for being, quote, terrorists. So how did they come up with this stuff? And this appears in the mainstream media, and it also appears in the mouths of our congressmen, many of whom are now calling for Gaza to be, or at least a number of them, totally destroyed. Some are calling for it to be nuked. Others are making it very clear, particularly the ones in Smotrich and our friend, or what's his name, Itamar
Ben-Gvir.
Yeah, or calling basically for killing all of the Palestinians that are not pulling any punches about it. And when is the congressman going to stand up and say, this is obscene? We're giving these people, what, $26 billion?
Well,
to help
Congress disciplined one of its own for saying from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be. She said that outside of Congress. They couldn't discipline her for saying it on the floor of the Congress because of the speech and debate clause in the Constitution, but they did discipline her for saying it outside the halls of Congress. One of our viewers just texted me saying he or she just finished watching a segment on college protest on a network of my former employer, Fox, which referred to the students as not pro-Palestine, but anti-Israel. This is the type of New York Times mantra that you were talking about, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly correct. That's being done across the board, and it's you know, this is like basically there's very little pushback on this. I think you probably are aware of the fairly major riot that took place at UCLA last night.
Yes.
And I watched the video of it, and it's rather interesting in certain respects. Here you had the students who were protesting. They were in their tents and they were gathering around and doing something. They were not being violent. They were not being aggressive. They were not hostile to anything. They were minding their own business. And they were attacked by a group, apparently, I've been reading today, of local residents of Los Angeles. These were not students. And they were all waving Israeli flags. And they attacked this campsite, and they were tearing down the tents, tearing down the structures. They were attacking the students. And meanwhile, there was a whole line of Los Angeles police standing by and watching this go on. So, you know, we've been brainwashed to the point where people can't even think anymore. I mean, this is obscene. People not making any trouble, protesting a genocide, get attacked by another group that clearly was organized and put together just to attack them, and police stand by and watch it happen. This is America.
So just leave it at that, and please check out the rest of Judge Napolitano's piece. But again, what this really allows me to see clearly is collectivism and how inoperable it is. It doesn't work, and how it pits people against each other. And again, if they stopped taking people's money for the handing out of the weapons and for the support of various regimes, for the support of the colleges or grants to the colleges or anything like that, and we had things operating under true private property paradigms of voluntary, true consent, then a lot of these arguments wouldn't be happening. Americans wouldn't be arguing with Americans over whether or not one side should be getting weapons or the other side should be getting weapons, or one side is committing genocide or the other side is a terrorist group or whatever, right? Because they would have less vested in it. Their morals wouldn't already have been brought into it. Like I said, my friend Anthony Gregory, I spoke to him one time. He said, yeah, I try to get out. I try to avoid paying taxes as much as possible. I was like, cool. He goes, yeah, I don't want my money used to kill people. And he has an excellent point. And so, obviously, the less often this happens, the better. The less often I impose on my neighbor, the better, I think. And the more options people have. Now, beyond that, people can say, well, would people come into conflict if they were voluntarily giving money? Yeah, maybe they would, but you wouldn't have the same degree, the same monumentally, exponentially gigantic degree of funding through deficit spending and political favoritism going to certain things and other things, whether it's the military industrial complex or it's, a college or a university doing this, or it's climate change, so-called research, whatever it is. You wouldn't get that bizarre, surreal warping that has no connection to how people would really want to spend their money. You wouldn't get the deficits that are immorally imposed and the debts that are immorally imposed on future generations. You wouldn't get the presumption of these politicians saying, well, I can decide for people who haven't even been able to vote yet how their lives are going to go. And those teenagers there, the 18-year-olds and the 19-year-olds on up into 2021, maybe even older people like Jill Stein, they have a right to be on those campuses if their money or perhaps their parents were paying taxes, right? Maybe they're not students. Maybe those local people are upset. Maybe some pro-Israeli person is taking their side, right? How can we say that they aren't justified to try to take over that land that is run by the college, but also is getting some of their tax money, right? Recognition and respect for private property is recognition and respect for the natural rights of your neighbor to have a property in his self and herself, and to own what he or she gets from the fruits of his labor. All other aspects, all derivatives of the collective are immoral. That is the state collective. You can have voluntary collectivism, but that's just freedom of association. That's just a group of friends, a group of people agreeing to a business deal, something like that. So I wanted to close it out there. We'll do the tariff thing tomorrow. I'm sorry to put it off again. But I hope I've done a good job for you. Now, I believe Jason Barker is on now, so I want to check out Jason. Is the Foxhole on tonight? Tonight being Wednesday? Oh, no, Tiger's Den is on. Tiger's Den is on. So I'm going to go check out Tiger's Den on Twitter, Rumble, YouTube, freeworld.fm, I believe, maybe. But you can check him out on YouTube, Rumble, Twitter. That is Angry Tiger is doing his thing. So I'm going to say goodnight. Thanks for being there, former con member. I'm glad you're there. I really appreciate it. I haven't seen you for a while, so I hope everything's going well for you, my friend. And thank you, Occult Priestess. I hope you got my text message. I want to, contact you and, just have you on. I really want to talk about esoteric occult stuff and some of the warnings you might give about some of these things on the government side. Some of the strains that are there. That would be great. And Birdhouse Blues, Freegan, thank you for being there inside Rumble. And Freakin says, I'm trying to two-time guard and Tiger. Well, switch on over, my friend. I'll give the goodbye theme. Tell Tiger I'll see him in there while I'm making dinner. And thank him for being such a great guy. And thank you, everybody, for being so terrific. And again, Jason Barker, thanks for the phone call chat yesterday. It was just great and really helped me out when I had that rough headache going on. So thanks, everybody. Peace, love. Check out Russell Brand's got his new video, just a video clip explaining why he got baptized. It's great, and it's great to see it happening. So God bless you all. I'll talk to you soon. See you in David Knight's chat tomorrow. Peace.